So the date is November 13th, 2010. And can I ask you to state your name?
My name is Leland Lester.
Thank you. And can I ask you when and where you were born?
I was born on December 10th, 1925 in San Jose, at the San Jose Hospital.
And what were your parents' names?
My parents' name was, my dad was Fred E. Lester, and my mother was June Lester.
And
Her maiden name was June von Dorsten.
And what did they do?
My father was an orchardist. My mother was a housewife, took care of 4 kids.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your siblings?
Yeah, I had a brother older than I, and 2 sisters, both older than me. And I was the youngest of 4.
And what were their names?
Their names, my oldest sister was Edith, and then my brother Raymond, and then myself. Well, my sister Marjorie, and then myself. I'm the youngest.
Oh, okay. And where did you live growing up?
I lived on the ranch at Almaden and Lincoln. If you go down Lincoln Avenue at the end where it merges into Almaden Road, you look across the creek, and there's a hill on the back of our property. Anyway, that's where I was born and raised. I was born in the San Jose Hospital, but that's where we lived.
Right. And where did you go to school?
I went to 3 schools. I went to the Lincoln Glen School on the corner of Kirtner and Minnesota. Then from there I transferred to Willow Bend School on the corner of Minnesota and Lincoln. Then I went to Los Gatos High School, and then that was it. After the war started, I stayed home and helped my father. I didn't go in the service.
Okay, so can you tell me a little bit more about how you became involved with helping out with the orchards?
Yeah. The war was on, World War II. My father needed help very badly, so I worked for him. He paid me $1 an hour because that was the going rate at the time. And my brother was away in the service, and when he got back, about 1949, he came back home, and I asked him if he wanted to be my partner, and he said sure. So we started a partnership about 1949. And well, in fact, all our lives we've been partners. He passed away about 3 years ago.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what properties you held?
Well, in 1950, we leased ranches.
Oh, okay.
Because there was a lot of development going on in the valley at that time. And we leased about 4 or 5 small ranches purchased by subdividers that had subdivisions in their mind. And they didn't know how to take care of the prunes and the fruit that was on the trees, so they hired us to do it. And we worked on those ranches on a percentage basis. And then after we accumulated a little money, we pooled our money together and we bought a 50-acre ranch on Center Road. And that was the start of it. From then on, property...
And do you know what year or what time period you purchased that ranch?
The first ranch was 1950.
Oh, okay.
And then this city came in and condemned part of our 50-acre ranch. They took away about 24 acres. And so with that money, we bought another ranch. We put some money down. So we bought and sold and bought and sold. In the meantime, the property was advancing every year. So that's the way we got ahead.
When you say the property was advancing, you mean the property value, or
property value? It seemed like every year it would go up $1,000 we paid for that ranch, we paid $1,000 an acre from Frank Ornelas, a Portuguese man. And it seemed like a whole lot of money in those days, but then looking back, the property values just kept going up and up.
Mm.
And later on, we bought another ranch on Bailey Avenue. It belonged to the Horio brothers.
And do you know about what year that was?
Yeah,
or?
that was 19. Excuse me, I have to think about it.
Oh, sure.
About 1955.
Mm.
Yeah, about 1955. Excuse me.
Oh, sure. Mm.
And then we bought that ranch and held on to it, and then we had an opportunity to buy another one, so we just kind of built up from there.
And so, in general, just wondering what kind of, what was your experience as far as taxes went? Did you have any issues with taxation or?
Well, you've heard of the Williamson Act.
Right.
We didn't go into that, and I'm glad we didn't.
Oh, and what was the reasoning for that? Or?
Something just told me not to tie my property up for 10 years. Excuse me, I've got a hoarse throat. And so we stayed out of it. To get out of the Williamson Act, you had to put in an application for 10 years in advance. 10 years later, you were out. And
Right.
I knew a lot of ranchers that were in it, and they said, gee, we made a mistake, we shouldn't have tied our property up.
And what was their reasoning for not wanting to have it tied up? Was it that they realized?
Because of the development of property, they would hold some property that might have been worth $1,000 an acre, and then every year it advanced, so they couldn't sell it. They were handcuffed. They were tied up and owning the property, not being able to sell. So in other words, it's an agreement with the city government that you would hold your property off the market, and if you wanted to get out of it to develop the property, you have to give them an advance notice of about 10 years.
Okay, so a lot of farmers regretted not being able to sell it to developers then. After
A lot of them did, yes.
And I mean, I know it was, you know, in terms of the advantages of, you know, was there anyone who, you know, who was happy that you're, you know, who seemed
was there anybody
to
that
benefit?
was happy with it?
Yeah, or that seemed to feel that it was advantageous, or.
There were quite a few people, especially people that own property out in the country. There was no development going on adjacent to their property, so it didn't really matter
Oh, okay.
with them. But it did to us, because we were not only farmers, but we were somewhat, you could call us speculators too. Because we were buying and selling property all the time.
Okay, and I guess if I can ask, how was your relationship with the government more generally? Were there any
Well,
problems that came up, or?
In the early 1980s, I was the president of the Santa Clara County Farm Bureau. It's an organization of over 2,000 family members. And being the president, I had to go before the Board of Supervisors and complain or try to get them to see things our way. But in general, we got along pretty well with the government. We didn't agree with all the supervisors that were in office at the time, but we were able to get along.
Then I guess, so I was wondering also about the practice of, I guess, swapping land.
No, not eminent domain.
Well, this was, I mean, Ralph Horio when I was interviewing him was kind of talking about these land, that a lot of farmers would practice land swapping instead of the formal buying and selling in terms of I guess not having to pay the tax on selling
Yeah,
the
I think
land.
what you're talking about is buying property and putting the property up and exchange it for other property. without
Right.
paying- There's a name for that, and I can't think of it right now,
I think he just referred to it as swapping, but.
but, yeah,
Hmm.
I'll think of it when
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. Did you have any experience with that?
Yes.
And,
Yeah, we had the second half of the ranch, after they condemned our ranch on Center Road, we sold that. Instead of selling it, we bought other property that they wanted, and we just exchanged it. By doing that, you avoid paying your capital gains tax.
oh, okay. Hmm.
So there was an advantage tax-wise to us
Right.
to be able to do that. We did that twice, in buying and selling land.
And I guess was that a pretty popular practice
Uh,
in general?
Not
Or?
really.
Hmm.
It was done. You had to hire a tax attorney to guide your way through, which we did. But yeah, thank goodness for that. And then later on, when you sell your property, eventually you do have to pay your property taxes.
Okay, so I guess the other, I mean, so in other words, it was a little bit of a more difficult procedure, so that's why it
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
quite as.
It was. I couldn't have done it myself. You're working with the real estate brokers and you're working with your tax attorney, but it was simple or simple exchange, but you just have to know how to do it.
And then, yes, another kind of thing that I was wondering about is I know in 1978 was when Proposition 13 passed, and
Right,
that
that's not the Williamson Act. Prop 13.
right,
Yeah.
which I think affected a lot of property tax rates.
I remember Prop 13 because we, the Farm Bureau, opposed it.
Oh, and why was that?
I can't remember all the details of it because it was so many years ago. And we had to go to Sacramento, and there was 2 buses of farmers that belonged to the Farm Bureau that went up there. And we had a little bit of an accident. The bus driver cut the corner too short, and his under part of the bus caught on the sidewalk, and all 40 people got out and picked the bus up and moved it over, and away we went.
Wow.
It's kind of a little humor, but that actually happened.
Wow.
We had the help of Gordon Chan and a lot of the Chinese. There's a lot of Chinese in the north part of San Jose.
Because I'm wondering, because Prop 13 generally was kind of aimed at lowering property taxes. So I guess I was wondering, if there's any, way that in terms of why the Farm Bureau would have opposed it. I mean, it's kind of off the top. It seems like like lower property taxes would tend to be something that would be desirable.
So you want to know the reason why we oppose it?
Right. I mean, if you remember any.
It's hard for me to remember back that far.
Right.
Of all the little details.
But I guess it was it deemed that, I mean, whatever the specifics of it were, that it just was not going to be good for
the farmers. Exactly.
Interesting.
We were united. We teamed up. We got all these people. We went out on Saturdays and Sundays and knocked on doors and had them sign a petition. So,
Okay, so the whole farming community was pretty unified against it then.
exactly. It's hard to remember.
Right.
That far. Anyway, farming has been quite an experience for me and my brother.
Yeah.
We got into it because we were ambitious, we wanted to make money, and we had the opportunity to rent a ranch. My father had it leased. He gave it up and let us rent it. So he was a big help in doing that.
Which ranch was that?
The first ranch we leased was owned by a dentist, a doctor, Dr. Abbott.
Oh. And where was this?
It was on where Dick's supermarket was on Bascom Avenue and Hamilton, right in the corner. 13 acres. So that was our first ranch.
I'm sorry, what date was that, or what would you have acquired that? Or what?
That was before we bought our ranch in 1950, so that had to be about 1940.
Oh, okay.
Right after my brother came home from the service. We were anxious to do something, and we were very ambitious, and my dad even loaned us the tractor. And eventually we saved enough money that we had our own tractor.
I guess if I can also ask, in the period after Prop 13 passed, that was about 1978. What sort of were there any issues that came up in the period after that you remember? Just generally, not necessarily.
Generally speaking, we did have problems. People would go out into vandalism. We'd have our sprinkler pipes laid out, and they'd run their Jeeps or their vehicles over the pipe and smash them. We had a lot of thefts. We dealt with all of those little issues. We'd go out to change the sprinklers some morning, and the pump was off, and all the pipe was gone. They'd carry it away.
Oh wow.
So that was a big issue that we had to deal with.
But I guess were there any in terms of property values or anything like that came up, in the maybe sometime in the 80s?
No, it was pretty much varied. Some property was worth more than others. Some of the ranchers would buy property, and they had the foresight to buy property next to a potential shopping center, where it could have, like a Blossom Hill Road in Almadam. The Persian brothers bought that ranch, and at the time I thought, why would they buy a ranch like that so far out? Now look at it now, it's worth millions.
I guess I'm wondering, was there any sort of noticeable? I mean, obviously, if Prop 13 wasn't advantageous, were there any kind of noticeable, problems that arose after it after it came into effect? Or
Well, yes, I can't at this point tell you what they all were, but as the issues came up and concerns for the farmers, we'd have our meetings at the Farm Bureau office, and we'd have to instruct the executive secretary to go up before the board of supervisors. We constantly had things that's what the Farm Bureau is all about, is standing up for the farmers and
right.
dealing with issues that we had.
I guess.
I come from a family of pioneer family. They came to this valley in 1888. Excuse me, 1983. My dad was born in 1888. So we have farming in our blood. I guess I'm just wondering if you could go back, or are there any decisions that you would have, that you think you'd do differently now? Or? Lots of decisions. We made lots of mistakes through trial and error. Everybody makes mistakes. We did things like we built a dehydrator in 1955 on the ranch, and we put up one tunnel. We already had two tunnels, but we put one more. Well, since we went to all that trouble, why not put another 2 or 3? We just didn't have the money at the time. That was a mistake. We should have borrowed the money if we had to.
What about in terms of like buying and selling properties? I mean, are there any cases where you think I should have bought that or
Oh yeah.
should
We bought a ranch. We bought several ranches and sold them. We kind of worked with the market as it went up. We bought a ranch on Ogun Avenue, which is in the Robertsville area of San Jose. We didn't think, but it didn't have any access into the property. No. So we held on to that ranch for about 7 or 8 years, and then we had the opportunity to trade it because a developer was going to start building right next to it. So we did. But we could have made more money if we had purchased in a different location.
And what year was that, or what period was that?
In the 1950s. My dad had some hard times. He went through bankruptcy in let's see, what year was that? 1940. Just before the World War II started. And the bank foreclosed on him, and he had to give them up because those were bad times, Depression days. And he owned the property on the corner of Hamilton Avenue and Bascom, where the Whole Foods store is. I don't know if you know where that is.
Oh yeah, I think I know that area.
It was 40 acres, and he had to give up a ranch. And the bank said either the 60 acres out to Berryessa or the one over here in San Jose. And we decided to give this one up. So that was a big mistake. But you never know those things. All in all, we came out pretty well, I think.
I guess was that because the ranch in Berryessa wound up? I guess
we sold that later.
Oh.
We held on to that ranch because it was more productive, but it was pretty far out too.
guess. If I can ask again, maybe about what kind of issues, maybe the farming community in general, like you know, what other farmers were going through. Guess I'm just wondering what other sort of issues with land came up in the, you know, in the last 30 years or so, you know, in the kind of 80s or 90s.
I'm not connected too closely now with the Farm Bureau.
Oh.
I'm not on the board anymore. It's hard for me to know exactly what issues they have now, but all I know is that at one time we had over 100,000 acres of orchard in this valley, which includes Willow Glen, Sunnyvale, you know, just this valley. And now there's nothing left. No orchards left. It's impossible to farm in this valley now. You grow walnuts or prunes, and there's no place to send them now. The canneries are all gone. So the last ranch we had was we sold it about 10 years ago, and we were picking our prunes. We had about 35 or 40 acres of prunes. And we'd send those prunes all the way to Yuba City, which was very costly at the time.
And can I ask which ranch was this, or where was?
The last ranch we had was a ranch that we leased from IBM, south of San Jose.
Oh,
okay. They hired us. I didn't mention that, but they hired us to take care of their property. And we harvested the prunes, the beautiful prunes, because they wanted to fertilize. They wanted to keep the orchard pruned and well manicured.
And what time period was this?
We leased the ranch with IBM in 1961, and we farmed it for them until about 1989 or 1990. We had that ranch for quite a few years. Good people to work for. But the harvesting, we depended on the harvesting of the crop to keep us going, to give us income. And that stopped all of a sudden. The last cannery that closed that we were dealing with was Stapleton and Spence. They're still open over here at Center Road. But they only use that for processing prunes now.
Where do most of the prunes that come into that cannery come from?
Come from Yuba City, Marysville. They bring them over here dried, and then they process the prunes.
I guess it's been about half an hour.
I hope I'm satisfying.
Oh yeah, no, this was very good. I guess that's probably.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh yeah, sure.
What are you doing this for?
This is so it's an oral history interview project for this class that I'm doing, where we're supposed to pick a topic that we've studied in our class, which is California politics, and then kind of interview someone of our choosing to gain some insight into that particular topic. And we're doing a final report, like a paper at the end of the quarter, that we ideally would use the interview maybe as a source within the paper, kind of looking at whatever the issue is. And so the issue that I'm kind of looking at were some of the state land use policies, so like the Williamson Act and the effect that Prop 13 had.
Yeah, I could think of, they're all gone now, but I could think of fellows that you could have talked to that were really involved with Prop 13, Williamson Act.
You might be able to find stuff on Google related to farmer groups opposed to Prop 13. It'll help explain some of the details of why Lee and others would have been against it.
Right. Yeah, that would be interesting because a lot of what just from the reading that I've done on it, it seems like there's it tends, the history tends to portray it as that, anyone who owned any significant amount of land was in favor of Prop 13.
But not necessarily
obviously,
so,
yeah, wasn't so. So that's interesting. So that'll be something interesting to look at. Yeah. So that we'll definitely.
So your interview is you may feel like you haven't contributed much, but it's valuable also in comparison to Ralph Horio's.
Yeah.
Because Ralph did participate in the Williamson Act, and so between what Ralph said and between what you said, it really gives us a much better overview of the act, of what the act was and how people responded to it, and whether or not it was something that actually was advantageous for them or not.
It would be more advantageous to Ralph Horio than it would for us.
Right.
He bought a mushroom farm. I guess he traded out of our property.
But some of a lot of the property that they had was in Coyote. And that was not, it's still not even in,
You're right.
it's still not in a position to be developed even today. So especially back then, they weren't thinking in terms of development.
Yeah.
But
but in
property
this area
closer in,
certainly
anywhere in Almaden or further in,
right.
that was hot potatoes,
Yeah. Yeah, the Horio family were big farmers at one time. They owned the ranch that they sold to us, which is 44 acres, but then they owned a piece of property, probably about 20 acres across the street. And they did own quite a bit of property.
Now, did Ralph said that he thought that this was even part of their Foxworthy property at one time. Was this, or was this part of the Von Dorsten's property, where you're sitting right now?
See, where I'm sitting right now.
Because Ralph said he owned some property on this side of Coke Lane.
Yeah, they did. They owned the property that they had on Foxworthy Road.
Uh-huh.
My grandfather lived just down the street a little ways.
But we were just wondering, is this property right here, was that part of either your grandfather's or of Ralph's property at one time?
It could have been part of Ralph's.
Yeah, because he seemed to.
Because Ralph said he had some strawberry fields.
Right, that were on this side of Coke.
That were on this side of Coke that went pretty far back.
Yeah.
He thought maybe this was part of that property, but
It's close.
maybe close by anyway.
Close by.
Yeah.
And I know exactly where the ranch is because if you go down this
Foxworthy?
No, Lansford Avenue.
Yeah.
You bump into Foxworthy,
Yeah.
turn left, and just in that area there's an old house in there. They built the house when they sold the ranch. One of the Horio sisters lived in that house. So I could pinpoint pretty much where the Horio ranch was. So they did have property. They had two ranches on 101 Highway.
Uh-huh.
The one they bought from us and the one across the street.
Right, I think they had other ranches too out there. One on Laguna,
They
one on
did.
Kalana,
Kalana Avenue.
yeah, and one on Laguna too.
Yes. Well, they had a lot of property.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I guess.
So that do it?
Yeah,
I guess we
it's
can
a
always,
pretty good.
if you have any other questions, you can always give Lee a call. But
Yeah, if I have follow-up questions. But yeah, I think that this kind of gives me a good perspective on both kind of at the different aspects of the Williamson Act, where in terms of who would have wanted to opt in or not, and in Prop 13, that definitely gives me. I mean, I had no idea that the farmers would have been opposed to it, so that's
yeah, you
something
might
I need
take
to
a
start
look on
exploring
Google.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It's amazing what you can find out on Google.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got everything on there now.
I asked my daughter a question, and she said, "I'll call you right back." She said, and then she's got the whole history. It's amazing.
It is. If we only had that when we were kids.
Oh gosh.
I mean, it's hard to imagine not having it, you know? It's like you have a question, well, we'll wait till this weekend, we'll go down to the library, we'll try and see if we can find a book on it, and if we get lucky, we could find an answer. Now, if you got a question, well, I'll be right back. I'll give you the whole history on it in just a minute. Just plug it into the computer.
What school are you going to?
I'm up at Stanford.
Stanford?
Yeah.
What is your ambitions to be what?
Landowner?
Well, hopefully, at least house or something like that. But I don't know. I'm kind of interested in. Well, I'm probably going to major in history.
Well, that's what I like is history.
I don't know. I might consider law school. Maybe, I don't know. Depending on how I feel at the end of 4 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, but history.
So are you going to high school now or?
Oh no, college. Yeah.
Oh, you're going to Stanford, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a sophomore there.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Well, good for you.
Oh,
That's a good college.
Yeah.
My cousin, Rickford Snyder, I don't know if you heard of him, Dr. Snyder. He was a history major, and he taught at Stanford University. And later on, they made him director of admissions to Stanford.
He would have been a good person to know.
Oh yeah, he just died about a year ago now.
Oh.
That name actually sounds familiar.
You
I'm
probably
sure
heard of him.
yeah, I heard of him somewhere. Maybe he was. Maybe he was in the. If it was a year ago, it might have been in the newspaper. You know, in the Stanford paper, because they published
You
things.
could have had an article about him.
Yeah. I'll have to look that up. I'm sure it's on the website somewhere.
When he retired, they appointed him to head up the tours that Stanford alumni, students and professors would go to. Especially was the Rhine River,
Oh.
and he would be the tour guide for the group.
Oh.
He made several trips. He enjoyed doing that.
I wonder, was he specialized in European history or something like that in terms of?
Yeah, he was very knowledgeable. I don't know, probably other history too. He did our family tree. We have a big family tree. He did a lot of research on that.
Interesting.
Yeah, but Lee's farm that he was talking about, you know, at the end of Lincoln, near Almaden.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
That's
our
our-
house. Yeah. Where it has
Yeah,
this
well,
thing.
in particular,
Well,
it was with the new houses behind the school. That's right where the farm was.
oh,
Because
okay.
the property, the whole huge property from Ironwood Drive over to the edge where behind the school where the prune orchard was,
Oh, okay.
you know, where the new houses start.
Right.
I mean, the new
Right,
houses.
right.
That huge piece of property all belonged to Von Dorstens, but that at some point, I think in the early 20s it was divided, and half of it went to Forrest Von Dorsten, and that's.
Yeah, that was not in the early 20s, it was later on.
Oh, okay. But that the half that we're on belonged actually stayed in the Von Dorsten,
Oh.
and then the other half was Lee's mother, who was a Von Dorsten.
Right.
So it was divided between a brother and a sister.
Oh,
So the
okay.
brother was Forrest, and the sister was
June.
June Lester, who was a Von Dorsten.
Right.
So that's how Ralph of Lee's property became a triangle. It was basically the school property all the way to the creek, coming into a point, coming from almost a point from the base of the hill.
Well, you got it.
Yeah, coming
Oh.
out and including the school property, Wren Drive, you know, where the tennis courts are.
Right.
That far, right behind the houses on Kingfisher, all the way out and including the properties that are the extension of Wren Drive and what is now Lanewood and Blue Jay right up against the Rubino property.
Oh, okay.
So it'd be a big wedge coming out to the creek, to the Guadalupe Creek. And the Guadalupe Creek was kind of their boundary
right.
to the west, and then the Canoas Creek was your boundary to the east.
Oh, okay.
The Rubinos were your boundary to the south, and your uncle's property was your boundary to the north,
Right.
right?
Now, years back, we had the hill, you know, where the Baptist church is.
Yeah, that belonged to your family too.
There's 16 acres, and they were really hard up during the Depression days, and they sold the property to a fellow by the name of Tony Souza.
Ah,
They sold it for $100 an acre. 6 acres, can you imagine that? Wish I had it back.
I'll give you twice that.
They were glad to get the money.
Right.
And Souza kept it a few years and sold it for about $5,000 an acre, I believe. That's what he paid. That's what he sold it for to the church.
Or did he sell it to the guy who had the
Oh, excuse me.
to the golf course?
You're right. The golf course fell about it. And they played golf at nighttime.
For a few years, yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, and then it went to the church.
Then
Right
from
after
there
that.
they sold it to the church.
Yeah. Yeah, I was up there one time and I found a golf tee on the side of the hill, and it was before, you know, we moved there after the golf course was gone. So I found a golf tee up there and I thought, what is a golf tee doing up here, you know? Little did I realize that, you know, it had been a golf course. Yeah.
When we were kids, that was my father's and my grandfather's ranch. And we'd go up there and camp all night.
On the hill.
On the hill, we'd set up a tent, build a fire, and boil some water, put some rice or something in it. We were living off the land. That was a lot of fun.
And Ron said that when he was a kid, that I guess your grandfather had a real old cart up there that I think maybe they had used to go over the hill to Santa Cruz. And your grandfather loved that old cart, and Ron thought it was just a piece of junk, and he pushed it off the side of the hill, and it rattled and until it completely disintegrated, going down the hill.
Fell apart.
And then when your grandfather found out, he wasn't too happy
I guess
with
not.
Ron.
I remember Ron telling that story. I forgot about that.
I get these different images that I think would make beautiful paintings, you know, of a kid watching this cart going down the side of the hill and falling completely into shambles, and then and then the viewer knows the rest of the story, you know.
Yeah. Just like up here in the front, the Guadalupe, oh, excuse me, it's right over here this way, Guadalupe Creek.
Yeah.
We'd get a truck tire and get inside the tire, you know, and a friend would push the tire over the bank. We'd go, that thing would go about 30 miles an hour down the bank.
And you go crashing into the water?
Into the water or into the side of the hill or whatever was in front of us. So wonder we didn't get killed.
Yeah, you better hope there's no branch of a tree down there waiting for you to crash into. These days it would be a shopping cart.
Yeah.
No, we'd get inside there and just hold on for dear life.
Oh, you bet.
And then we'd be going down, oh. But I'm here. I'm still here.
Yeah, you and Ralph. We were talking to Ralph Horio. He had an experience where he was emptying a dump truck full of
This was compost.
compost, and it was up on his property, and it was a slight grade, you know, not real steep, but just slight. And he was emptying this compost into his wife's garden, had a big vegetable patch, and the compost was kind of moist. It was kind of wet, kind of damp,
Yeah.
and it wasn't sliding out. So he got it real steep, but because he was on a grade, the whole truck started to go over with Ralph inside of it. It started to go upside down,
It did.
and so Ralph real quickly released the dump the back to bring it back down, and he said it didn't just come down slowly; it crashed down, so that Ralph banged his head on the cap, and then he came crashing back down. But fortunately, they didn't go completely, you know,
There's
over.
also the forklift story about, I guess,
Oh,
he was I guess emptying bags of compost or something. I think it was compost, and then I guess he had the forklift on the truck. But what was it that the truck somehow, I guess, as he was lifting it off, that the forklift slid, and the how did it work? It was
there was something about he had a forklift on the back of a truck, and he got out of the forklift, and he was doing something.
He was like unloading it onto the truck, and then the forklift slipped and well.
But basically, somehow he was behind the forklift. It came rolling.
Oh no,
You probably have the right picture.
I thought it was that the lift. I mean,
Was he in the back of the truck?
I think he was in the back of the truck, and I think somehow it slipped in such a way that the lift wound up basically falling right at him, and that somehow one of the forks of the forklift, I guess, went right through the bottom of his shoe, but missed his foot.
Yeah. You know, one of the grabbers for the forklift, it slipped right between
the bottom of his shoe.
Between the bottom of his shoe and his foot, and it slipped right between that.
No.
Just went right in.
He's lucky to be alive.
Well, he's lucky to have his foot.
Yeah.
Could have lost his foot that way.
Yeah.
But you know, I guess when you're a farmer, there's lots of opportunities for accidents.
Thinking back, I can remember a lot of things that I did that was crazy. Kids take chances.
Well, he wasn't a kid; he was an adult at that point.
Oh, was he?
But you know, there's a lot of things when you're working with that heavy equipment.
Yeah, I know.
You got to be thinking all the time. You know, lots of opportunities for accidents. Whenever you have stuff that you're used to working with, but you're in a slightly different situation, and you don't stop to consider what the ramifications of that are.
Yeah.
You know, you get something like weather at play, or a change in grade. You know, you're in a different location, working with different people or different materials, or you know, any change can bring about, you know, can bring about an opportunity for an accident if you're not thinking all the time.
Yeah, you're right.
Alright, so before we start the camera, I guess can I ask one more question? I guess just kind of generally, you know, as president of the Farmers Bureau, how just generally, how did how did you feel about the city council and the government in general in terms of meeting your concerns? Do you think they?
Well, the city council and the board of we dealt really more with the board of supervisors than the city council. But we had our issues. Some of the representatives that represented us we just didn't agree with what they said. Dominic Cortese was one of them. Most farmers are Republicans, generally speaking. And not all, but some of them. And we'd argue back and forth. Miss Mary Annie would start arguments. Ray Benish would be a good one for you to contact. He would know more about the Williamson Act and the Proposition 13 than anybody I know of. I may have given you his name. Anyway, we to answer your question, we had issues that we dealt with, and we just had to take it.
I'm just curious, in terms of most farmers being Republican, is that just in terms of how, I mean, kind of in terms of being able to, I guess, you know, was some of that in terms of how the government viewed land, or how?
Well, it's hard to answer. My father was a Republican, and my grandfather was a Republican, and church-going people, straight.
So, I mean, it was more than just kind of like economically advantageous. It was also kind of a cultural.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kind of a value system, I guess.
Okay. So I guess I was just wondering if there was a tendency for, you know, in terms of things like property taxation and things like that, where, you know, where Republicans would tend to want lower taxes, that, you know, maybe that would have had some bearing on what farmers would have.
You know, as an example, Cesar Chavez, he gave us a bad time. He'd come out and claim that the chemicals that we were using were poisonous. He used the word poisonous, which I think he was being a little bit strong in saying that. Yeah, I forgot about Cesar Chavez. We did go up and speak against him. And some of the more liberal board of supervisors were on his side, and it was kind of split.
Yeah, because that's true. That would be another thing that would come in, definitely, would be farm labor issues. Because I know Ralph had a lot of help, you know, migrant farmers and people helping out on farms. So farm labor issues would, you know, definitely come into it for large landowners who depended on help.
That's right.
Did you have any particular issues with farm labor? I mean, you mentioned Chavez. Were there other kind of conflicts?
I didn't. We had a lot of people working for us, and in those days, you were glad to have a job. We would hire pickers to come in from Southern California, like El Monte, California. We'd actually go down with our truck and pick them up. And they threw in 2 or 3 mattresses and a few pots and pans, and nowadays they wouldn't put up with that. I used to argue, I said, if you go camping up in Yosemite National or it's no difference. You're sleeping on the ground, and
Mm.
it's only temporary.
Mm.
So we could get away with it. And then finally, when Ray Binish got in trouble, I don't know if you remember. You were here then? You were born in San Jose.
Yeah.
He had very poor living conditions for his workers.
Uh,
And a social worker went out to the camp to take care of one of the sick pickers, and she got an idea of what Ray Binish was furnishing, the squalid conditions, and it caused a big turmoil here. It was a terrible embarrassment for him, and he meant well. They didn't have laws that said you can't carry your water. You've got to pipe it in, you've got to have better electricity. And then they started having these inspections done, including at our ranch. That was my job. I'm kind of a handyman, and I updated all of our electrical and our water conditions and the garbage, but he didn't. But if you ever talk to Ray Binish, don't mention that to him.
oh, okay.
That would be
It's a sore spot.
very sore.
Yeah.
To this day, he says that Governor Brown, he hated Governor Brown. Jerry Brown.
Right,
that's
right,
when
yeah.
he ran for. He was governor of California at that time.
At the time that he was having the trouble with the,
Yeah.
it wasn't his dad.
Well, no, it was Ray.
I mean, it wasn't Jerry Brown's dad.
No.
Because Jerry Brown's dad had been
no,
governor.
It was Jerry himself.
Okay.
Pat.
Pat Brown had been his father, yeah. How you
Oh,
doing? We don't want to keep you, yeah.
Let me see.
It's 4:02.
I'm gonna pick up this person.
5:15.
5:15. You're right.
So I think we're doing okay, but I think
Yeah.
and anyway, this tape is just about over here.
Yeah, yeah.
Does that kind of
Yeah, this was very helpful.
That do
Thank
it?
you very much.
thank you, Lee?
Okay.